having me. My title here is also a little different, and it's about the same concept, really. It's about urban drought management in the Irvine, Orange County area. So I don't know if there are AV capabilities to play this clip, but if not, you can see a screenshot of it. This is a small commercial. I think it's like, yeah, 13 seconds or something, 15 seconds from the Irvine Ranch Water District. And they have a lot of diverse marketing related to water conservation, even when we aren't in a drought. So this is a recent commercial that they commissioned, and you can watch it later from the clip, but it's basically a guy who's being blasted with a mouthful of water for 12 seconds. And then the clip says, see it from your lawn's perspective. So basically, as the weather heats up, people tend to kind of drown their grass in water that it doesn't need. And so the water district is trying to anticipate that and tell people, like, it's okay, just because it's hotter doesn't mean that you need to flood your lawn with water. So a quick overview, if you have been living in California for the last few years, you'd know that we had the last several years being the worst drought in California's history. It was so bad that I think they actually created a fifth or a sixth category for drought severity, being like really extremely, exceptionally dry. And so the progression of the drought just goes to show that even though we were trying to conserve water, that wasn't enough to keep up, and it wasn't enough to remove our drought status. So my area of interest is the Irvine Ranch Water District service area. If you live in any of these places on the map, you are getting your water from this water district. And it serves 6 cities, over 300,000 residential customers, and they have a number of rebate programs just for outdoors. They have indoor programs for low efficiency, low flow toilets and things like that. But for outdoor rebates, which is what I'm interested in, they have a variety of programs, and I focus specifically on the red box one, which is the turf removal rebate program. And what that means is for every square foot of grass that you rip out and replace with something drought tolerant, what they call xeriscaping, you get a rebate from the water district in the form of $2 for every square feet. So if you decide to rip out 500 square feet, you get $1,000 back, which is a pretty good deal. So these programs really ramped up in the height of the drought, 2014 to 16, and you can see that based on all of the articles, news articles, hundreds of millions of dollars poured into just this one type of program in Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego area. And what happened was that it quickly exhausted. It was really, really quickly dried up. And then people were wondering whether those programs were doing what they were intended to do anyway. So I look at a lot of data on a geographic scale. Here I'm looking at, you're looking at a graph of the cumulative number of applicants over a 7-year period, and this kind of encompasses the period of the drought. So in this period, I'm showing a bunch of different curves, and a lot of them are kind of collapsing on top of each other near the bottom. But each one of these curves is what they call a village. And a village is a neighborhood or community in the service area. So if you live in Woodbridge, if you live in Newport Beach, Newport Coast, maybe you live in Irvine, what is it called? The Great Park area, or you live in Orange Park Acres, like any of these cities, you live in some kind of village. And so each of these villages have similar house ages and characteristics and housing demographics, things like that. And so each one of these has a pretty particular type of pattern over time. And so you see Lake Forest being the red curve under the black one, which is just the total. That has the highest rate of accumulation, and it actually picks up the fastest and the earliest. So in this village, you might think that these people have more awareness of the drought, but actually part of my analysis shows that home age explains about 75% of the variance between different villages. So older homes, we think maybe because they're older, they might have larger yards. And actually in Lake Forest, there are lots of older homes with really big lawns. And newer homes tend to have, especially if they're like post, I think 2015, there are restrictions on how much grass you can actually put on lawn. So developers are actually restricted by these new regulations, and it's maybe a quarter of your outdoor landscaping can be lawn. So fewer of those newer homes might be incentivized to go into these programs. Whereas if you have a very old home with a really large yard that's all grass, then you can get a lot out of this program. I don't have that much time to go into analysis, but I wanted to show all of the different community members and stakeholders that I've reached out to. So I've done presentations throughout the last year to different audiences. In December, I went to a scientific conference. There was 25,000 scientists there. I also went to a research poster symposium in March. I met with Congress members and their staff in Washington, D.C. In April, I talked to graduate students at UCI. In May, I did this kitchen/tea event. And in a few days, actually, I'm doing a workshop with the Irvine Ranch Water District to help customers figure out ways to save water in their home. So if you have any questions or concerns, you can ask them now. And this is just a list of things that you could do if you're interested. Thanks. Yes.
I've seen that commercial that you mentioned,
Oh, yeah.
water being sprayed in your guys' face.
Yeah, it's funny.
And I just wondered who paid for that. There were a lot of those commercials on for a while. I wondered who paid for that and what its cost was relative to some of the other costs, like turf replacement.
So it was the Irvine Ranch Water District. They have a water efficiency department, and they actually do a lot of marketing. I mean, during the drought especially, they had things like, you might remember, billboards, bus posters, signs around like the freeway, right? Those big signs that have like, we're in a drought, use less water. Radio commercials, TV ads, stuff like that. So those are paid by water utility companies because they get fined by the state if their customers are using too much water. So they have an incentive to pay out money to make sure that people are conserving water. But relative to the amount of money being spent on turf rebate programs, I think that the turf rebate programs do get like the lion's share of funding related to conservation programs, just because it's pretty effective. Like you put a billboard up, you don't know if people are going to save any water at all. But if you rip out a lawn and replace it, you know that every year that lawn is replaced by something that doesn't require water, you're definitely saving water. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes.
And what did the Irvine Ranch Water District spend on the turf rebate program?
They've had the program since 2009, I think, although it wasn't that popular in the first few years. And they've had I don't know exactly how much they spend, but it's definitely in the millions and over this time period. So they sometimes have programs where they front all of the money for these programs, and sometimes like the Metropolitan Water District, which is the Southern California wholesaler, will pitch in a certain amount. And so they have these kind of short-term contracts to say like, okay, you pay this much, I pay this much, and the customer gets this much. So depending on the period and the funding from other sources, they may pay a little bit more, a little bit less. And the program's still available right now as well. Yes?
So let's talk about making the possible from the impossible. If you go to India, Domino's delivers the pizza in 30 minutes. If you break down the time frame, it's impossible, but they do it. If you look at this water program, looking forward, the requirement is what, 50 gallons per person going forward?
What do you mean by requirement?
So there's a California mandate coming forward in about 10 years that says every person gets 50 gallons per day.
Oh, for using?
Right.
Yeah.
So is that achievable? Because given our HOAs need green grass, and if we don't have green grass, we get fined.
Well, they don't need green grass, but they write in their requirements that homeowners have to have them or something like that. During the drought, when the governor was saying that you need to save at least 25% of your water relative to the previous year, some homeowners were letting their grass go dry and go brown, and the homeowners associations were fining them. And then the governor had to step in and say, HOAs cannot fine residents for having brown lawns. So I think if that's going to go into effect, then those HOAs are going to be forced to either redact or revise their requirements for what outdoor landscaping is. So there are some pretty odd things, like if you want to have a green lawn, you can replace it with artificial turf, which is plastic. I've seen companies during the drought that are specifically for spray painting brown grass green. And they were making a killing during the drought because that was the aesthetic. But I think the point is that as we move forward, if we can move towards an aesthetic that is less green grass, not our climate, and more things that are drought tolerant but still that look nice, I think that 50 gallons per day would be achievable, because more than half of the water that households use in this area goes to outdoor landscaping. And really, it's not really a requirement for sanitation and everyday living. Thank you.